tipped your hand a little bit that you have this interesting origin story. If you're a superhero, part of your origin story is that your family came from a different part of the planet. So
Oh,
do you feel like some of your what you gleaned about work comes from that part of your origin story?
I think, I don't know, maybe not so much. Like I was most recently in Cameroon a couple of years ago when my dad passed away and we all went back for his funeral. And that experience, I think, shed light for me on the Western, or at least the United States version. I was going to say Western culture, but United States version of our relationship with work. It's so bizarre compared to like other cultures and countries. Like, what are we doing to ourselves? But I think right, like
Yeah.
crazy. Think in terms of power. I mean, I want to be transparent. I don't know who's going to eventually watch this, but the two times that I've been in administrative positions in these school districts, I both times I've been really fascinated by examining this notion of power and like political power and structural power and the relationship between values and power. Like if our values don't align, that can really wreak havoc on a system if the values are not aligned with the people who are supposedly in structural power, right? And I don't know. I think at least the most recent time I left, it was really because the notion of power, who gets to decide outcomes, like uh, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't jive with that, couldn't align with that. I'm not being very direct, but
It's okay. I also think about how, as artists, our sense of self-power and determination becomes really interesting. I
Mhm.
think that when you're a workaday like office person, your power is often limited.
Yeah.
But when you go out on your own and you start your own thing, you sort of have to work to sort of slough off that like who am I answerable to? And that
Yes.
is hard when you've been socialized in that power structure,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was just reading an article last night on the Atlantic that was talking about how uh, the whole notion of being a knowledge worker is about not necessarily your daily output. Uh,
Mm,
there are these sort of like middle managers who don't know how to do their jobs unless they're managing people's visible work.
yeah. Yes. Yeah. The visible work, like that fascinates me so much, right? Is the value that we place on visible work and the value of the invisible work that really we completely tend to ignore in this culture in some ways. And I just, in terms of creating, I think you're right that the act of being solely responsible for one's own output, one's own productivity, one's own livelihood, that's incredibly empowering and also terrifying.
Yes.
There's a lot of like there's a lot of safety in salary, tons of safety in salary, safety and security. And I so often wonder what would people actually be able to accomplish if they chose a different path, and how much more security and safety could they actually discover for themselves if salary wasn't the guiding like north star, speaking of stars.
But it is so hard when power is tied to economic output or
Yeah.
input.
Yeah.